Hey, and thank you for joining me. I'm really excited to be part of the Product Drive conference. So special thanks to Userpilot and Product Drive for putting this together and for inviting me to speak to you. The talk today is going to be on managing multiple stakeholders with product strategy. I'm John Fontenot. I'm a growth product manager at Lendio. We're a fintech small business loan marketplace. I'm also the founder of Path to Product, where we are helping bridge the gap in product management experience for aspiring PMs. And I'm also the podcast host of Lessons in Product Management. So if you like podcasts, go download or subscribe to our podcast anywhere you listen. So the agenda for today consists of 4 key things. One, we're going to talk about why we don't actually manage stakeholders and why I hate that expression. 2, we're going to talk about what good product strategy looks like and get away from the theory and get into a practical framework. And number 3, why product strategy matters in the first place and why I believe that product strategy should be something that happens at the top of the organization, but also within each product team and why it's important. And then lastly, how to maximize your use of product strategy, namely going back to the key point around working with cross-functional partners. So to dive right into it, we don't actually manage stakeholders. It's a misnomer. And I think it's funny that in job descriptions and on LinkedIn with like skills and stuff like that, stakeholder management is something that pops up as something that you need to be good at. And I just think it's a funny expression, right? Because every product manager knows that if you are, even if you're a product leader, like really the only authoritarian influence you have is within your own product organization. But as far as stakeholders go, you don't manage them, right? And so talking about internal stakeholders inside of your company, you don't manage the VP of marketing or the head of sales. So anyway, I just think it's a funny expression. And I want to get it out the way that we don't manage these people and they don't have to do what we say or comply with our wishes just because we say it. So wanted to level set. If you're brand new to product management, wanted you to have that knowledge going into it before you get in. And if you're currently a product manager, you're probably laughing too, because you know this to be true, right? Or maybe you've seen the frustration of thinking that you had more influence than you actually did until you earned it, right? So stakeholders are partners. They're not pawns to be moved around to do your bidding, and they're not problems in your way to progress. They are partners and should be treated as such. If anything, we manage the flow of information, right? In our relationship with our cross-functional partners in marketing, sales, customer success, legal, finance, we manage the flow of information. They have information that we need, and we have information that they need. And when we share that information at appropriate times in an appropriate cadence, the organization can move forward faster, right? And we could also challenge our assumptions. There's a lot of value to frequent communication across functions and not operating in a silo. And we're going to talk about some of that through the rest of these slides. So what is product strategy? There's a lot of opinions. Your thought process around product strategy or what you've learned may be different than what I'm going to show. But I found this to be a really good framework to use that's really practical and can be used really easily, right? Like you can take this conversation and go apply it right away. And yes, there's other factors that you need to consider going into this. And I'll kind of talk through some of the nuance, but really the importance is how do you use product strategy to work with your cross-functional partners. So that's what we're going to focus on. So the key components are, number 1, you have to identify the business objective or goal, right? My definition of product management is finding the magic middle between business objectives and customer problems, and what customer problems or opportunities can you solve that get you to your business objective. So I always start with the business objective or the goal, right? Next, if you don't identify the challenge, the key challenge in your way of meeting your business objectives, then you'll never meet it because it'll always still be there. So to solve it, you have to identify it, right? Is it a business challenge? Is it a customer challenge? Primarily, I try to think through the lens of the customer challenge. Which major customer challenge can we overcome to get us closer to that business objective? And that's typically the lens I look through when using this framework. So next, you need a guiding policy. So what is that? It's basically like a statement or guardrails, right? It could be a statement of guardrails, a singular statement that provides constrained focus around how you're going to attack a problem, right? I was once in an organization where I led the strategy behind shifting our go-to-market strategy from a sales-led process to a product-led growth process. And the guiding policy was really one word. It was friction. And we were going to prioritize where we remove friction to transform our product into something that was able to be supported by the organization through a product-led growth model, right? So as an example of what that can look like. And then the coherent actions are really what make up the epics and stories on your roadmap, right? And so with using the example of friction, we were prioritizing where in the customer journey there was friction that was getting them in the way of the experiencing value of our product, right? And so the coherent actions were incremental steps, epics that we could tackle on the roadmap to incrementally create value, to decrease time to value and increase conversion rate. And then product outcomes, these are typically behavioral outcomes. What are the behavioral shifts you expect to come out of this from your customers that lead to your business objective? And then you also want to have leading indicators of success, right? So measures that you can know along the way before getting to the lagging measures of revenue or churn or whatever that is. What are the leading indicators of success? That might be early warning signs that you are being successful or not, right? So why does product strategy matter? Now that we have a framework that we can work within, why does this matter? Well, first, it provides a North Star to guide us, right? Primarily the business objective should be our North Star that guides us and the lens by which we prioritize things that we do. And then it gives us an anchor to focus, right? By creating a guiding policy, when we have feature requests from customers or we have feature requests from cross-functional stakeholders, sales claims they're losing too many deals because you don't have a feature, we have a filtering mechanism already in place by which we can say yes or we can say no, right? And it's a great communication tool for alignment. So if you don't just keep your product strategy to yourself, or maybe with your boss or your team, if you share it broadly, and now you've created a great communication tool to create organizational alignment. And you might find that they're doing some of that filtering for you. So when they bring you ideas to maybe build a certain feature or problems that you could solve that you may not know, they might be able to now filter through to say, oh, does this ladder up to the challenge we're trying to overcome? Is this going to help us meet our business objective? And in this way, by communicating your product strategy, you're educating the rest of the organization on how you prioritize things, which helps them help you. Okay. And then it informs our roadmap, right? Those coherent actions become the epics on our roadmap. And so as we follow the product strategy framework, it makes it really easy to see what we should be prioritizing on our roadmap. And then because we're communicating it, you don't have as much pushback from stakeholders, cross-functional partners that question why you're doing what you're doing. It's very transparent, right? And then it holds us accountable to outcomes, right? If we have it documented, this is what we're doing, and this is where we're trying to go, and this is what we expect to come out of this, then there's complete visibility into that. And you can hold yourself accountable and others can hold you accountable to it too, which is a good thing. Accountability is a good thing. Knowing whether you're successful or not and what you can do about it is a good thing. So this is where I'm going to spend a good bit of the time, right? We want to be able to co-create product strategy to an extent, right? If we want less friction with our cross-functional partners, if we want them to trust us more and we want to increase buy-in, co-creation is a great way to go about it. Co-creation is talked about a lot with our customers or our users, right? Co-creating products, but reframing this in the lens of product strategy by collaborating with our cross-functional partners is a great way to look at this. Okay, so leverage the framework to do it. Go to your business objective and align on that, right? If you can start at the North Star that you're both trying to reach, like as an organization, you're trying to reach a certain business objective. Maybe it's within your business unit, maybe you're a smaller company and everyone has the same objective or goal, right? And I'll talk about that nuance in the next slide. But if you're aligned on the business objective, everything else in this process becomes a lot easier. So this implies that you have to talk to your cross-functional partners and not assume that that you are going after the same thing, right? But once you have that, then you can align on the challenge, right? So they may be hearing things from customers. You may be doing user interviews. They may or may not be telling you what they're hearing. You may or may not be telling them what you're hearing, but you should create that space, put some time on the calendar and have those conversations. Ask them about their challenges as a team and as a department, right? And then share with them what you're learning about the challenges and issues that the customers are facing and how you're weighing those, right? Are there any themes that scream louder than others? Are there any thoughts that you've given, which you should, to prioritizing which pieces of feedback that you're getting, right? If you have a framework like the RICE framework or any other prioritization framework, show it to them. Show them the work that you've done. It's kind of like math class growing up, right? Where it's not about just the right answer, but it's how you got there, showing your work, kind of the same thing. So once you've aligned on the challenge, informed by your research and discovery, then you can go to the approach, which is probably the stickiest part if you've done the first two things right. Right? There could be endless debate on the approach, but ultimately a decision has to be made. I always like to come to the table with a solution and have them try to poke holes in it, or the solution may still have assumptions baked into it. Not the solution, but the approach, the guiding policy, right? There may be some assumptions baked into the guiding policy that we propose, and that's a great thing if they can surface things that where you were wrongly assuming something. If they can surface those false assumptions that you made earlier in the process, that's helpful to you. You want that. That is the type of disconfirming evidence that you need as a product manager to make sure that everything else that follows, namely the roadmap and the stuff you execute on, is going to be more solidified and have less holes in it, right? And then number 4, now that you're aligned on the approach of how to overcome the challenge thematically, right? Then it's context-based roadmaps means that they are going to understand much more effectively the decisions that you've made. And you can even bring that to them of saying, hey, here's the approach that we've aligned on to overcome the challenge that we've aligned on. And here's how, showing your work, here's how we've prioritized the opportunities that we could pursue within the constrained focus that this guiding policy provides. Here's how we're going to focus our efforts, right, through these things that we're going to go build or execute on, etc. Right, and then aligning on the expectations. So we expect that if we accomplish these things on our roadmap, if we ship these things to market, here's the customer behaviors that we expect because of this, and here's the business outcomes, right, the key results that we expect from these behavior changes, from the work that we did. So once you're aligned on the expectations, then you can move forward with confidence that when you start executing, there's going to be a lot less friction. Now, there still could be friction, right? And there's going to be a need to continue to level set, right? Don't just communicate this once, but continually reiterate this back with your cross-functional partners, because we are creatures that are influenced by recency bias. And so fires come up all the time. Customers are begging for this, or something happens in the organization. And most times there's not major shifts that'll totally derail our product strategy. Most of the time it's little things that pop up that try to distract us. But now that we have the lens through which we can filter things, namely our product strategy, we can go back to them and say, okay, how does solving this problem align with our guiding policy? If it doesn't, then we ignore it. If it does, then we go and say, okay, does this take a greater level of priority than the things we've already prioritized on our roadmap within the time constraints that we may face? So it's a lot more of an objective conversation at that point than a subjective conversation. And you've already established the framework that you're going to use to make those decisions. And they're aware of it, right? So it's not just you doing it on your own, but they've bought into it. And now you're just reminding them of what they bought into. Okay, last thing. I mentioned earlier that in bigger organizations, business units might have different goals, or departments might have different goals that are really all trying to get to the same top line objective, right? So what happens if marketing and sales and customer success have different metrics that they're trying to move, right? Different goals that they're trying to hit that ladder up to the ultimate objective. This can be tricky, right? Because people are going to want to know what's in it for me. How does the things that you prioritize in your roadmap impact me? Why should I care? And how do I know that you're helping me, right? Those are all questions you should be able to answer. And having a product strategy framework like we've showed will help do that. Okay, so this might look similar, but identify each department's goals. Step one, start with the goals. Step two, identify their challenges. Empathize with them. Empathy is not just reserved for your customers, it's also reserved for your internal partners as well. So if you understand their goal and their challenges, then you can document and leverage those inputs. So that way, as you're developing your product strategy and you're communicating it back to your cross-functional partners, you can reframe the story you tell about your product strategy. You're not lying, you're just reframing of how the things on your roadmap will help them specifically, right? Not in the broad sense where if everybody has the same goals and objectives, but how does this specifically help them? For example, if in the product-led growth strategy part, right? The sales leader says, oh man, we have this goal of increasing, number of deals that we get, but we don't have the budget to increase headcount in our sales department. Okay, great. Let's talk about how the things that we're doing on the roadmap is going to help your sales reps do more with less time. Marketing. We have to get this many leads into sales' hands, and we don't know like how we're going to do it. Like that's our biggest challenge right now is how do we increase qualified leads? Okay, cool. Here's how the things on our roadmap is going to help throughput of those leads, maybe help qualify them. Who knows if that's on your roadmap, but here are the things that we're going to do to get more throughput of those leads into sales through the product, right? So just as some examples of how to reframe your product strategy or how to point to specific things that's going to help them. And then it allows you to communicate your product strategy contextually back to those partners. So quick recap, we don't manage stakeholders, but we do need their partnership, right? Number two, product strategy isn't a nice to have, it is a must have. Your life will be a lot easier. I'm not saying you have to use this framework, you can use others, but leverage the product strategy framework or the way you develop product strategy to follow some of the steps we talked about today, and it'll save you a lot of headache downstream. Co-creation is key for buy-in and alignment. Don't do things in silos. It's rarely a good idea. And then reframe when necessary. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. It was really fun spending some time with you. And if you want to reach out, you can find me on Twitter at Product Font. You can find me on LinkedIn at John Fontenot. Just type that in, it should come up. You can email me at john@pathtoproduct.io. I'll be happy to send you a free PDF copy of my first book, Great Leaders Always Follow. A lot of leadership through influence is talked about in there. I interviewed a bunch of the leaders across the world, so it's not just me spouting off. But be on the lookout for my new book coming out. It should be out in Q1. It's called Never Assume, the 10 Fatal Assumptions That Great Product Managers Never Make. I'm a little more than halfway done at this point, but it's coming along pretty well. So follow me, reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. And until then, we'll see you soon.